Is Netflix a parasitic leech that is draining the life out of the anime community? Strong opening. I know, it helps with retention. So, what am I saying? Am I saying that Netflix is the worst thing to happen to anime and the other platforms are doing nothing wrong? Not really, because they also come with their own problems. For example, Crunchyroll. They have their own host of problems, and now that they have incorporated animation, it's only going to get worse. So, am I saying that these platforms are making products that are actively harming anime in general? Yes, but that's not it. I'm talking more on the larger scale, how they are affecting anime community and the anime industry. And the only thing I could say is the only decent anime streaming platform I could say is Hulu. But who has a Hulu account, right? And now Disney Plus is like getting into the anime game, buying up some anime, and it's like stay in your goddamn lane, right? Like who is going to get a Disney Plus subscription to watch anime? So to explain my point of view, I'm going to try to give you a top-down view of the anime industry and how that functions. So this video is going to be broken up into a few pieces. Let's get started. First, let's discuss how the anime industry makes money. You see all these headlines about how anime studios barely pay their workers and animators above minimum wage, and how they are constantly like out of money and they're like barely any budget to make anime. And you're like, okay, is anime not profitable? And the answer is no. Anime doesn't really make money. And if you're asking, if anime isn't making money, how is the anime like industry still functioning? It's because they don't make money from the anime, but they make money from one, merchandising, two, international licensing, that's where Netflix comes in, and three, anime themed pachinkos. And like pachinkos are like a really big thing in Japan, so they're like really profitable. At the same time, all those things are controlled by what you would call a production committee. I'll explain what that is in just a minute. But the least profitable revenue sources within the anime industry is home videos, digital distribution, and anime music distribution. So if you're listening to the opening of your favorite anime on Spotify, you're probably helping the studio who made that by a slight margin. Those three revenue sources are where most of the studio's money comes from. Let me throw up some stats on the screen right now. In 2021, the global anime market was estimated to be around $24 billion, and 29% of that consisted of merch sales. So the production companies are taking all that money. So what is a production committee? Simply put, a production committee is when a bunch of entertainment companies come together to fund an anime. So they specialize in different things. One of them can do like the marketing, one does the distribution, one does the merchandising. All in all, they all come together. They have a seat on the board. They fund a portion of the anime. They don't have to fund equal portions, but your profit share is dependent on like your investment share, ROI. So they're putting forward the money to make the anime, and whatever merchandising sale, whether the IP is successful or not, they're reaping all the rewards. And for example, some of them are Sunrise, Aniplex, and Studio Ghibli. And between the three of them, they control 40% of the global anime market share. And they have like 700 different IPs, whether there are like TV shows or movies together. And imagine how profitable all that is. 40% of the entirety of like the anime market. And imagine how profitable Ghibli merchandising is. These are like the people who run the entirety of like the anime industry. And these are some other influential companies and studios within the anime industry, those who usually end up on committees. But the thing is, most anime studios don't get a seat on the production committee because most anime studios are contractors. What happens when an anime is being made is that the production committee sets aside a budget and they hire an anime studio to do the work. So they get their budget upfront, which is roughly the estimation, it's like between $3 to $5 million, and they have to make that like 5 mil work for an entire 12 episode series, and they have to stretch it out between all the episodes and have to pay or the employees that work on it, and they have to save whatever money they have from that to pay everybody who's not even like, even if you're not directly an animator working with that show, they have to use that money to pay their employees. And that's why animators' salaries are very low. And quick mention that a lot of anime are like collaborative projects, meaning that the production committee has just one studio. That studio will still outsource some of their work to other studios. So it's not, they're not even just like paying their own employees, they're paying the employees, they're like hiring another anime studio to do a portion of the work. So that 5 million is gone immediately. And that's why a lot of studios are not profitable and a lot of them lose money a lot of the time on a lot of the anime they make. And the only reason a lot of studios that are not constantly getting like high end work survive is like every so often when they make a banger and they get paid a lot of money for that, they put that money aside and they use that to pay their employees going forward until they make their next banger. And because the production committees very rarely split their revenue with the studios, they are heavily reliant on home video sales to keep their bottom line or to keep them in the black. But the problem is home video sales have been on the decline since 2005 because we're in the digital age. Who owns CDs anymore, right? But still, the studios need that to stay afloat, and that's why it's like ridiculously expensive to buy like anime CDs in Japan. And that's why a lot of anime studios are like very feisty when it comes to streaming platforms, streaming anime in Japan, because who would spend like $50 on one DVD when you can just get a Netflix subscription and watch a bunch of anime, right? And to make the situation even worse, digital sales are also just like dropping off the cliff because in this day and age, who wants to own any kind of media, right? It's on a platform, you can go watch it anytime. So a lot of people don't feel the need to own any media. And a lot of studios rely on those home video sales and the digital media sales to barely stay afloat. And that's why 25% of studios report losing money every year. Just like the anime industry is very flawed in its structure in that way. But it gets worse. So let's get back to the other source of income within the anime industry. Licensing, or international licensing to be exact. Even though a lot of people presume that the international anime community doesn't really matter and all anime studios care about is the Japanese audience, that's factually incorrect because in 2015, licensing was the second highest income source in the anime community. It was merchandise, then the international community, because there are billions of people worldwide who watch anime. So you really have to be like branded not to realize that. But a lot of licensing companies, Crunchyroll, Netflix, even Funimation back in the day, they never really disclosed how much they split their revenue between themselves and the anime production committees and how much of that made its way to the anime studios themselves. But it is believed that some of the money makes its way back to the anime studios. So for all their faults, these streaming platforms give a little bit back to the studios that make all the anime that we love. Since we're talking about licensing in streaming platforms, an obvious a point I'm going to make later in the video that I should just like clarify now is just piracy. And when it comes to anime, how it affects like the anime community. It might not make sense to you how this is relevant now, but I should really just like make a point here. When it's like the discussion in anime, you see it on Twitter, you see it on TikTok, both sides are like really down. One is like, if you steal, you're killing the anime community, and the other side is like, if it's free, why pay for it? Everybody is really dumb about it because like this was like the same thing that happened like in the early 2000s when music went to digital and the internet was like exploding, and like it was even an episode in South Park, like the more mature something becomes, the more stable it becomes, the more regulated it will become. And in a couple of years there will be like a larger, more established streaming service that service those ideas of like having something for free, you have to like watch ad force where, and the other with premium kind of thing that has a lot of people. The issue is either it's the amount you pay for what the anime you get doesn't make sense, and the other is just like, why would I pay for anime? And both of them are kind of right. It's like, why would you pay for something if it's free? But at the same time, if you have a platform that have thousands of anime you want to watch and the price is very fair, why not pay for it? You're helping the anime community. So in a few years, something like Spotify, a giant company that is going to like eat up all like the going to monopolize like anime streaming, and something that is similar to Spotify or YouTube is going to be born in the anime community. So both arguments are kind of dumb and very short-sighted because they don't really see how things have evolved for other means of digital distribution. Happened to the music, it's going to happen with the anime. But how does pricing affect the anime industry in general, right? It's estimated that the anime industry loses millions of dollars every year to piracy. Of what? Manga. There is a lot of discussion about how piracy of anime really affects the anime community, the anime industry, rather, I should say. How it affects it generally, it does really harm the streaming site that legally have the streaming rights to those anime. But at the same time, that it doesn't really have a direct effect on the anime industry, because when streaming sites license anime for the streaming rights to like a certain region, they're paying upfront for the anime. So whether or not you pirate the anime, the production committee has already been paid. The anime studio has already got their cut. So you're not really taking food away from the plates of like the anime studios or even like the production committee. You're just fucking over Netflix, and that's fuck Netflix. But what it does harm is home video releases, and those are the lifeblood of anime studios, because they don't get because the production committees are getting the lion's share of the merchandising, the licensing, even the pachinkos. So anime studios have to rely on this less profitable income sources to stay afloat, and pirating seriously affects those. And I'll tell you later when I'm wrapping up this video. This point is going to be like this is going to make sense. Stay tuned to the end of the video. And with that, let's get to our next part. We discussed the production committees that finance this anime, so let's talk about the studios that make them. Anime has been growing every year for the last decade. From 2002 to 2017, it doubled, and it was earning somewhere around 19 billion. And it's estimated by 2028, that is like 5 years from now, the anime industry is going to be valued at somewhere around 47 billion, right? So with that in mind, why is that animators in the anime industry living below minimum wage at some point? And why are they working in conditions that are pushing them to their limits mentally, physically, and emotionally, to the point where they're just like constantly getting burnt out, and some people just like even like game ends themselves, right? Why did I try to censor myself? They kill themselves. Seriously, some of these studios are being run like they're like labor camps, and these studios, these artists, like the artists that work there, are objectively being exploited for their art. And they're making a lot of good work, but it's at what cost, right? And what makes it worse for this animator is that anime is almost entirely hand-drawn. Even if you're using digital tools, you still have to draw it. And with a bunch of anime fans that are going like, there is like 2.5 seconds of CGI in my anime, garbage, mid-tier, get out of my face, get the fuck out of here, this is a garbage show, I never watch it. The problem is the idea of like every anime being made perfectly hand-drawn, beautiful, just aesthetic. The problem is there is like nearly 200 anime that come out every year, and there is literally not enough animators within the anime industry to make that work. So studios have to rely on what is freelancers, basically unpaid exploited workers that work for pennies, literal pennies, just because they love anime, and that is the only way you can break into the anime industry as an animator. Okay, when a show is being animated, there are two kind of frames you can draw. There's like keyframe and an in-between panel, where the keyframes are the solid pictures that you see, that you recognize, and the in-betweens are the panels the frames that let you perceive emotion. So the keyframes are something like Deku making a punch, that solid punch, that is a keyframe. But those like Naruto photos of like those Naruto snapshots of Sasuke making a weird face, those are in between. So those are only meant to let you perceive motion. So in betweens are drawn by entry level people or the freelancers that are being exploited. And the key animators that are called mid-tier animators, they animate those key animations. So let me give you like a breakdown of like how much money you're probably gonna make doing this key animation in between and everything else. What happens when you become a freelance intern or someone who's working for these companies to make in betweens, right? You're making 200 yen, which is less than $2, on every frame you draw. And on a yearly basis, annually, you're probably going to make 8,500. And at the maximum, you're going to make 10K, right? And that's it. And that's your yearly take. You don't get no benefits because the company hires you as a freelancer, which means you're an independent contractor. They don't have to give you healthcare, any kind of protections. They could fire you and hire you at any point. No labor courts, no nothing, no worker protections. If the company just decides to fuck you over to save some money, you're fucked. And it really doesn't get any much better when you get hired by the company, like by the studio, to become a key animator. To put it in perspective, the Japanese minimum wage is a little over 900 yen an hour. So monthly you're making $1,100, and annually you're making a little over $13,000, right? People who are working minimum wage make more than people who do in betweens. And when you get promoted to a key animator and you get hired by the studio, things don't get a lot better because even if you're working as a key animator, the most you can think of making within a year is 20K. And that's not from one studio. You have to be working multiple jobs to even manage 20K. So you're barely being paid more than minimum wage, and you have to do 2, maybe even 3 jobs to stay afloat. But if you're lucky enough to get promoted into the position of a production assistant or a computer graphics animator or episode director, you'd be lucky enough to make within the range of 21K to 24K. But what you really want is to get promoted to be a series director, because then you'll be making 47K a year. But the laughable part about that is the Japanese median income is somewhere around 500K yen a month, which is like $4,730, which makes it so that the median income in Japan is 56K a year. So even if you manage to scrape by for years and get into the position of a series director, you're still making below the median income. The only person within that hierarchy is making over the median income is the executive producer, which is making a little over 70K. So you have to realize just how horrible it is to work in the animation industry, because the only people who are like actually getting rich off of this is like either the people who own the IP of like the biggest anime or the top 0.1% of voice actors. Those are like the only people who are like making away with like bags and bags of cash away, because you have to consider this too, right? In most major cities in Japan where the population is over 500,000, your living expenses monthly are going to range between 1,000 on the low end and 1,600 if you're like living in Tokyo. So at the very least, you're spending 12K a year to just find decent accommodation, not to like live good, just decent. Because you know that scene in Chainsaw Man where he's living in this small storage closet that is not fit for a human being, and he is barely scrounging together enough money to pay for food. The inspiration behind that was the mangaka lived like that before his mangas became popular. That is how people on the low end of the whole anime industry live until they start working up their way like in the corporate structure. Because if you're making in betweens, you're living like Denji. And to just drive the point home, a simple fact for you that even though Japan doesn't have an official poverty line, let me give you just a simple comparison with the United States. They're both developed countries. They're fairly affluent, so it kind of will make sense. Okay. The median income in the United States is 54K. The median income in Japan is 56K. The poverty line in the United States is 13K. Even though Japan doesn't have an official poverty line, if you assume they're like similar, in between animators are making 10K a year. They're living under the poverty line if you decide to go into anime as a new animator. So how did things get this bad? Where did things go wrong? Well, they were wrong from the jump. So imagine this, right? You're in the 1960s, everything is in black and white, and there's this dude, Tenzin, who is trying to pitch his show Astro Boy, right? He thinks it's going to be great, but it's hard to convince a bunch of studios, a bunch of companies to fund your product where it's you have no proof whether it's going to function or not, and they didn't want to lose money. So he decided to make Astro Boy on the cheapest budget possible, but he understood that he was going to lose money on it. Like, it was never a question of whether Astro Boy is going to be profitable or not. It lost money. It was always going to lose money. He knew it because he was never planning on making the show profitable. He was planning on profiting over the merch that were going to be sold after the show aired. And the show aired, it became uber popular, and the merch sold like crazy. It went off like gangbusters. So the success of Astro Boy set a precedent. And Astro Boy is considered to be the first anime, even though it's not the first animated show that was ever produced in Japan or broadcast in Japan. It is the first proper anime where it inspired like the entirety of like the anime community that we know. Everything came from Astro Boy, and because of that, every studio emulates what Astro Boy did when they produced the anime. That was the precedent. But nowadays, when production committees are setting a budget, they're going to follow the long-established precedent and try to keep the cost as low as humanly possible. And whatever revenue is made from that anime is going to be split between the network, the manga publisher, and the toy makers or the merchandisers, because they're the ones who distributed it, and the ones who own the IP, and the ones who are producing or the manufacturers of the merchandise. And historically, like, merchandise will always make more money than any TV show or any anime could ever do. But when you say something like that, the image that comes into people's mind is Pokemon, of it being very popular and like a multi-billion-dollar IP. But the games in the anime is fairly popular. What is like surprising is just like how profitable merchandising could be is Hello Kitty. Like, Hello Kitty has a show which I'm sure is popular in only a few parts of Asia, but it's one of, I think, top 5 most profitable IPs in the world. I've only seen it being aired on TV once, but for I think pretty much my entire life, I've seen kids with Hello Kitty toys, merchandising, bags, everything. Merchandising will always out-earn anime, and the studios are not seeing a penny of that money. And if they are, they're only going to get a slight fraction of a percentage of what the production committee is earning. But in recent years, the popularity of anime has skyrocketed. Obviously, like, the international anime base is like, fan base is like growing every year. So much so that in 2017, international video sales made up half of the revenue earned in the anime industry. But even with that, the barely livable wage that animators make has never changed, because that was established in the 1960s. And imagine this, when anime looked like this in the 1960s, it was a fair assumption to make that somebody could just make a bunch of panels within a day and make a decent wage. But nowadays, when anime looks like this, how many frames could you possibly make of this within a day? And you're only getting less than $2 on this, right? So imagine working for, I don't know, like 15 hours a day, earning less than minimum wage. And what makes it worse is when Western streaming services went into the anime business, they didn't try to, they were not obviously going to try to change it because it was profitable for them, because they paid dirt cheap to get their hands on those anime, because in their parts of the production process, as Netflix is, or they're just licensing the product, that the production committee, they're just trying to recoup the their investment in the anime, so their initial budget. So what the anime is worth is very cheap compared to a Western show where they sometimes have to pay 20, 50 million to get like the most popular shows. They get some of like the best shows for dirt cheap for like 5, 10 million. And that money doesn't even make it to the studios. It's taken by the production company, the networks, the merchandisers, and the streaming services. Netflix is going to walk away with the profits from that anime, leaving animators and studios barely hanging on. That's this part. So, in the last, I would say, 9 years, the anime community has seen a boom in. A lot of that is due to the international anime audience, and the people who brought anime to that international audience are international licensors. And when you say international licensor, the first thing a lot of people think of is Netflix, because it was surprising for me to know when I found this out. But did you know that like Netflix is like one of the world's like biggest anime producers? Like they take a bunch of anime, just like slap Netflix original on it, and just whoop, Netflix anime. Like, in the last 7 years, Netflix has had, I think, over like 100 different anime that came out that are like quote unquote Netflix original. A lot of them, okay, I'll say this: some of them are garbage, some of them are good, a lot of them are mid. So Netflix has been an established part of the international anime industry for a while now. So we've been speaking about licensors. Let's just see how Netflix plays a role in the anime industry. We have production committees, the studios. They give them the anime after they finish it. They lease it out to licensors, Netflix, and let's see just how Netflix works or how they affect the global anime industry and community at that. To start off, their well-meaning efforts, where Netflix, in collaboration with Wit Studios, has opened the Wits Academy. So the Wits Animation Academy, where Netflix plans on supporting young animators to pursue their careers and go into animation, because there is like a shortage of animators in Japan. So why is Netflix going so hard on producing anime and putting it on their platform? Because it is profitable. It's very profitable. So much so that one of the Netflix executives was once quoted as saying something along the lines of 90% of their North American members watch anime, and roughly about 50% of the global like Netflix members watch anime on their platform. So much so that I don't really know how, like, where the number is on their subscribers. It has been going down for a while now, but regardless of this number right here, half of those people are potential anime watchers. Why wouldn't they make anime? It's just so profitable. It just makes so much sense, right? Since they put Knights of Sojournia on their platform in 2014 and slapped Netflix original on it, they've been pumping out anime on that platform constantly. Every season there's new anime that's come out that are Netflix originals. I'm doing the air quotes because Netflix originals are not Netflix originals. Netflix a lot of the time doesn't have anything to do with the distribution or the production. They just got the exclusive licensing rights, and they got the rights to market the anime as Netflix originals. Like, these are like all the anime that come up when you Google Netflix original, and they're not. A lot of the time, a lot of people think Netflix making all this anime. They're not. They're just licensing it. How do you know the difference between something that was produced by Netflix and something that just bought the licensing from? Is when you look at the Wikipedia of like the anime, the slot where it says producer, if there is Netflix or Netflix Co or Netflix 10, it probably means Netflix had a part in the production. But if Netflix only is mentioned in the licensing part, they just bought the rights for that shit, slapped on Netflix original, and marketed it. And those marketing efforts have made them a lot of money. So that's what Netflix is getting out of the anime industry. But what are they putting in? Because, don't ask what the anime industry can do for you. Ask what you can do for the anime industry. Well, what happened is in 2017, Netflix announced that they're going to set aside $1 billion with a B to invest in their anime, right? In their anime endeavors. But it wasn't only in the acquisition of anime, where I really did hope that was all they use that money for, because it would have been significantly better than what they did, because they set a good chunk of that money aside to make their original productions, movie productions, live action movie productions. So that was like money well spent. And they have like acquired the rights to make the One Piece live action. God knows how much that cost them. Even though a lot of what they did was like money sucks, they're actually cooperating with Production IG. We're working with them to make like a Terminator anime. So they're kind of innovating in a way where they're animifying things. So on one hand, where they're like destroying beloved ideas by making them lifelike. On the other hand, they're investing money to make a lot of anime, a lot of IPs that people like into anime people might like. But I have seen a Wolverine and an Iron Man anime that are garbage. So not everything that gets animified is going to be good. But they're making an effort. But for what little good they manage to achieve, sometimes seemingly by accident, they do a lot of harm. Something that is obvious to point out that everybody knows is Netflix. So basically, Netflix has this streaming method that is called the binge one. Like apparently they put on all the episodes of a series at the same day. So you log on to Netflix on the weekend, you binge the whole show, you have a great weekend, and that's it, right? But that doesn't work with anime, because one, it's anime is supposed to be watched weekly. Yes, old anime can be binged, but new anime should be experienced one at a time. Believe me, that is like the best way to experience an anime. But the problem is, to make that schedule work, they have to either pre-launch it or like post-launch it, where they're something weird sometimes that happens is it's not going to be simulcast, but it's going to release on the same day. So January 1st, the first episode drops in Japan, and January 1st, Netflix drops the entire series in its entirety to their like larger Western audience, right? So by the time episode 2 has aired in Japan, most people have already watched the entire series. And sometimes they post launch it, where it comes out months, even a year later than it's supposed to, because it works well within like the structure that Netflix is creating of like their other shows, and they always have their own statistics and analytics, where they're telling them, okay, this would be like the best way to launch this to get like the most amount of views or like new subs out of it, because obviously they're doing that because they're running a business, but they're really damaging the overall anime experience or anime watching experience. So in conclusion, let's just bring all the points we made so far together. So first, to piracy and Netflix binge model, is it detrimental to the anime community, and is it detrimental to Netflix? Does Netflix lose money from piracy? A little bit, but the kind of people who are pirating anime are not the kind of people who are going to get Netflix. They're not buying that shit, they're not spending money on that shit. But Netflix, if they have like 90% of their North American members and 50% of their global members just watching anime, regardless of how much it gets pirated, those people who are already subscribed are going to watch it. And since Netflix, as already established, is licensing those anime for cheap, they're not going to lose money on the anime they invested in. They get it, they put it on the platform, and they're going to turn a profit. And even when they're participating in the production process, they're not fully funding those anime. Even if they were, it would be like 5 mil. It would be like one of the cheapest shows they produced. They're actually just buying a seat at the production table, because there's a lot of other people who are in the production committee, and just Netflix is just investing a portion of the budget, which is, as already established, barely a budget to those anime. So Netflix doesn't really lose money when it's because of its model or because it's being pirated. But Netflix being the model actively hurts anime fans, the anime industry, and anime watching experience as a whole. First, there are pre-releases when they're releasing ahead of time. You could check this, you could Google this, but JoJo Stone Ocean, the Western release was at the same day as the Japanese release, but the show was released when the first episode of JoJo aired. The entirety of season had dropped on Netflix. It happened with all 3 seasons, and I can't imagine a world where that didn't get pirated and it wasn't all over the torrent site, and it really butchered the viewership of JoJo in Japan. And that is the reason why that the Japanese Netflix anime selection is anemic, to avoid something like this happening. When Netflix is licensing this anime, they make a deal with the studios not to broadcast this in Japan, but because they don't simulcast it, it's available early in the West. Anybody with a VPN could just turn on Netflix and watch it, and it definitely eats away at the profits of the local broadcasting networks. And it's not even that; it is easily available on any torrent or any pirate site, literally the day after. That absolutely affects the anime industry in a very negative manner. If Netflix wanted to be an archival source of a library of anime, it would have been the greatest anime watching site in the world, because they already have an established 50% of their entire global audience that is willing to go and watch all the anime they have, and they have billions set aside to get new licenses. So they could have thousands upon thousands of anime, like classics, like everybody loves 90s anime, early 2000s anime that everybody wants to watch and rewatch. But they don't do that. They're only interested in new upcoming anime because it's popular. People want to watch it. But the problem is, every time Netflix gets their hands on an upcoming or a newly released show, they kill any buzz like the show could have had. Think of anything, just JoJo's, Kakagurui, or even Edge Runners. Even if it is their own like original anime that they help produce, they kill all the buzz. No show that was released, no anime that was released on the Netflix binge model ever gets traction. This fact didn't really hit home until I watched Edge Runners. I watched Edge Runners at the same time where House of the Dragon was wrapping up, and I've been watching House of the Dragon for like the entirety of like it airing. And you really, when you go online, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, anywhere, you really feel the difference in the communities, because Edge Runners, it came and went. It was just ephemeral. It was just who was even here. Like, it was popular for like 2 weeks. It's kind of skyrocketed the popularity of Cyberpunk 2077. I think I don't play the game, so came and went. Everybody liked the memes, watched the show, forgot about it. Right? House of the Dragon aired for 10 weeks, in which with every week progressively my entire For You page, it was just filled with meme after meme, video after video, people referencing it. A couple of months before, I didn't really notice it. Like, the binge model was kind of annoying. There was no discussion within the anime community. JoJo memes died. But it still gets the anime you want to watch, and you can binge it within a day. But Ace Runners, I watched it and I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to see what people were talking about it. And it was kind of a relevant topic for like a week and a half, but then it was gone. And anime releases like this of the binge model will kill the anime community, because if there are no shows that are being discussed within the community is going to get fractured, and it will just stop being a community. It will just be a bunch of people who have the same hobby. That would really suck, and that is actively hurting the anime community as a whole. And what Netflix is doing is actively hurting the anime community as a whole. And there, I get that the binge model could have profit within a certain margin of time, where there every time a new season of Stranger Things airs, like their subscriptions go up, and people like are there for like a week, but people just don't renew their subscriptions the next month because there is literally nothing to watch, right? Like, if I get like the binge model could have been like profitable like a few years back when everybody wanted everything now, but when a lot of different like streaming services exist, how can you ensure like the loyalty of your customer base if you're only giving them everything they want immediately, then expecting them to come the next month where you don't have any kind of like other products or shows that they could enjoy? It's just you watch Netflix for a week, you just make a third or like 17 Google email accounts, you log in, get a free subscription, you watch the show you want, and you just don't renew your subscription. So how I don't really see how this binge model is profitable for them in the long run, especially when it comes to anime, because anime is a yearly thing. There are like 4 seasons of anime, and every 12 episodes runs for 12 weeks, then it passes into the next anime cycle. So if they had different shows that were coming out every season, letting them play out the same way, like simulcasting them, would retain their anime watching audience, but they choose not to do that. So I don't see how that is profitable for them in the long run. I'm not in the back end of the Netflix figuring out how they make that work, but however they planned on making that shit work, it is still hurting the anime community. Because when you're watching anime, it's supposed to be a 3 to 6 months experience with a lot of delayed gratification where you're just being drip fed the content, and that helps you build a ravenous fan base that wants to consume the product. Because the first month or like the first few weeks, only weirdos like me who watch every seasonal anime know about all the shows that are airing, but the good ones will rise to the pile of shit that is every seasonal release, and the good ones will always float to the surface. And by the second month, people are they're discussing about, like, episode 5 of this show aired and it was really good, and it's being discussed within the anime community. People are watching it, and by the third month, where the first core is ending, if it is a 2-core show, where it's like halfway between the show, or where the first season is the first season of the show, or the season of the show is wrapping up, like the last 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, we'd have a spike in viewership because there was a period of 9 weeks where people have been discussing this anime. That, I would think, will be more profitable for Netflix. But regardless, Netflix is going to release their anime on their model, and their anime is going to be here and gone tomorrow within 2 weeks. Nobody's going to remember them. And is this entire video a way for me to justify why I pirate Netflix anime? Yes. And if you're one of those people who is under the delusion that getting Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll subscription is somehow helping the anime industry, you're not. If you really wanted to help the people who are actually making this anime for you, you'd be better off buying the 10th edition box set of whatever anime you love. Because that money will go further in helping the studios and the animators make more of those anime than any number of subscriptions will ever do. And still, I'm harping on this, but the Netflix model doesn't even make sense. Because even Disney, the people who are like so obsessed with money, are simulcasting. If they see the value in simulcasting, why didn't Netflix? But regardless, even though it's an archaic thing to do, buy CDs. Help the anime community and the anime industry. Fuck Netflix for killing JoJo memes. But with that said, that's the end of the video. I hope you learned something new, and if you didn't, that's several minutes of your life wasted, and you're not getting it back. Okay? So, and one thing, if you want a video on why pirating is not a big deal, like and subscribe. We'll see if this video gets traction.